Have you ever wondered if God is real? Like, really real? Well, when I was in my 20s, I had a crisis of faith, I guess you would call it. And I needed to know, is God really real? So I put him to the test. And here's my story. Back in 1994, I was working as a graphic artist in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in my mid-20s. Things were going very well. I had been working at other graphic art jobs. This was the first real graphic art job where I really liked the place where I was working. I had started off as a summer intern, and I had been working there for a few months, actually several months at this point, and I was really getting comfortable, really enjoying the process. So the way that it worked is I was brought on as a summer intern. At the end of the summer, they told me that they would like to keep me on a temporary basis, and that if everything went well, eventually I would have a performance review and that I would be considered for full-time employment at that time. But I had to go through this trial period with that. So I really poured myself into work. I really enjoyed working at this graphic art place in Halifax. And it wasn't too long that I had been working there when my manager took me aside and said, "Look, we just want to let you know, we're really happy with the work you're doing here and that we see management potential in you." I'm like, wow. You know, for a guy in his mid-20s, that was really nice to hear. At the time, I was married with 2 young children, a third on the way, and I had been working at various jobs trying to make ends meet for a few years now at this point in my married life. And we had struggled. And this was the first place where I felt like I was making enough money to actually make a decent living for me and my family. So hearing these things was really, really good for me. But I have to admit that while things were going really well at work, things were not going really well at home. Like I said, I was married, had 2 little kids, and we had another one on the way. And the more I worked, the more stress was happening at home. My wife was feeling left out, feeling a little bit neglected, and feeling very much alone with these 2 little girls. And when I say little, I mean very young, like 2 years and under. So it was a lot of work for her, and then I would come home, and we were doing a single income home where she didn't work. She stayed home and took care of the kids, and I went to work to try to make enough money for us to live on. And things were they weren't going as well as I would like to have seen things go in our marriage. Well, one day when I went to work, and I loved work. Every chance I got to work overtime or stay behind, I took it because I'd never had a job where I made decent money before, and it was nice to be able to pay the bills and be able to do a few other things other than just pay the bills. And I was loving the whole work routine and all that sort of thing. And having been told by my manager that I had management potential and they saw real potential in me for the future, I was just really excited about the opportunities that I had at work. But one day when I went into work, the strangest thing happened. I heard this voice in my head. Now, obviously, we all hear a voice in our head sometimes as we think about things. And that voice is something that we expect to hear because we're thinking about things. But this was different in that the voice that I heard wasn't a voice that I put there. This was something coming from outside of me. At least that's how it felt. And the voice had a very specific message. It said, I didn't create you for this. Like, wow. I knew what that meant. I knew that it meant I was not created to be on this track toward management in this company. See, I kind of had two options. I could go this way and do the corporate life, do the become the manager, move up the various levels in the corporate ladder, and make more money, have more prestige at work, that sort of thing. Or I could go this way and kind of go into the unknown and see where life would lead, or where God perhaps would lead. But like I said, I really wasn't sure about this whole God thing. See, I grew up in a very religious home. My parents went to church every Sunday, and sometimes more than just on Sunday. And I had been raised as a very religious young boy. And I did well in church. I loved church, and I loved all those things. I definitely saw my parents live their faith in front of me. And I had borrowed their faith. You know, I definitely had faith that I had borrowed from my parents. But when I got this voice in my head, I really started to ask myself the question, do I believe that God is real? Is God really real? I didn't know for sure in my own life. And so I thought, well, there's only one way to know, and that is to put God to the test. So as a 25-year-old man, something along that line, I decided I'm going to find out for myself if God is real. And the way I figured I would do that was to create a test for God. So I said, after much thought of what I wanted to do, and of course, I didn't tell anybody about this. I hadn't told my wife. I hadn't told my friends. I didn't tell anybody. This was simply between me and God. But I said one day, and I believe I said it out loud one day after I had thought it through, it's like, I want to make sure this is not just something in my head. I'm going to tell the universe. I said out loud, God, I need to know if you're real. And so I'm going to test you. And here's the way I'm going to test you. I'm going to ask you for 3 things. If you can deliver on those 3 things, then I will give all 3 of them back to you. And I will do whatever you want me to do. I will go wherever you want me to go for the rest of my life, no questions asked. But I need you to deliver on these 3 things. And the 3 things were, number 1, I want a Volvo. Number 2, I want a home of my own. And number 3, I want a job that pays $30,000 a year. Now, at the time, I had a car, but I needed a new car. My car was not in good shape, and I needed a new car. And I'd always wanted a Volvo. And so I thought, okay, well, no point asking God for a beater. I want a nice car. I want a Volvo because I love Volvos. I'd never had a Volvo before, but I'd always wanted to have a Volvo. So I thought, I'm going to use this opportunity to get what I want. So I asked for what I wanted, which was a Volvo. We also had been renting in Halifax, Nova Scotia for a number of years, at this point, 4 or 5 years. And we were ready to have a house of our own. And we had dreams of having our own home and establishing ourselves in the community and, doing the whole American/Canadian dream, having our own home and building the equity up in that property. And at the time, like I said, I was working for this graphic art place in Halifax. I think I was making $23,000 a year annualized, but I was, like I said, I was on a temporary contract, so I was getting paid a certain amount per month. But I think it worked out to around $23,000 per year at the time. So I wanted a Volvo, a home of my own, and a job that paid $30,000. That was a pretty big reach, pretty big ask. And I thought, if God can deliver on these three things, then for me, that will convince me that God is real. Well, I knew that I couldn't just sit on my haunches and expect that God was just going to magically deliver all these things to me, that I needed to do my part. And so I was looking in the newspaper. This was 1994. The internet wasn't a thing at that point, at least not in Nova Scotia in 1994. And I was reading the classified section of the newspaper and checking to see if there were any good cars for sale. And I saw a Volvo, and the price that the guy had on the Volvo looked pretty good. So I called my father. My father has most of his life been a hobby auto body repairman. And he's actually done it professionally, but mostly he did it as sort of a side hustle. And he had a little garage where he lived, also in Nova Scotia. And so I called my dad up and I said, look, there's this guy who's selling a Volvo for this price. What do I need to ask him if I'm, going to ask about the car? So he gave me some advice. So I asked him, and he told me what I should say. So I called the guy up and I said, hey, what's wrong with your Volvo? That's how I started the conversation. And the guy's like, well, he said, I'll be honest with you. I bought myself a brand new Volvo recently, and I've had this one. I bought it new, and I've had it for a while, but it's got some rust issues. The car was 8 years old at this point, and Nova Scotia is notorious for being rough on car exteriors because of the salt in the air being so close to the ocean. And so I said, is that the only problem with the car? Is it just that it's rusty? He's like, yeah, the car works like a charm, but it's got some serious rust issues that would need to be dealt with. And I thought, I just want to get rid of the car. I don't want to deal with it. So if you're willing to accept a car with rust, you can get yourself a great car at a great price. So I called my father back and said, look, here's the deal. He says the car's in great condition, except that it's got rust. Can you deal with that? And my father said, not only can I deal with it, I think I can do this for you for free. So I called the guy back. We arranged to buy the car. It was within my price range. And I got the car, took it to my father. Within a couple of weeks, he had the rust all taken care of, and he had it freshly painted. And I had a beautiful Volvo 1986, I think it was an 860, 1986 Volvo, silver color, and it was by far the nicest car I had ever owned. And tell you the rest of the story, I drove that car, I think, for another 6 years, and turned out to be a fantastic automobile. But let me get back to the rest of the story. So of the three things, the first one was down. I had my Volvo. Well, a few months later, I was reading in the newspaper again, not in the classified ads part this time, but I was reading just the paper, and there was an ad. And it was like, that traditional, the sun shone on it, and it glowed, and like I heard angel voices kind of thing. And the ad said, if you're paying more than, I think it was $650 a month in rent, if you're paying more than $650 a month in rent, you can afford to own your own home. Well, at that time, I was paying $700 and something in rent where we were staying for a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm like, well, I'm paying more than that. And I'm looking for a new home. So I called them up and I said, I saw your ad and I'm very interested in knowing more about this own your own home for, less than what I'm paying in rent. And the guy said, wow. He said, you're calling me in December. That's very interesting because nobody ever buys a home from us in December. But I got to tell you, I don't know what you're thinking, but this is a mobile home. Like, a trailer? Yes, this is a trailer. So if this is what you're looking for, then I absolutely can get you into a brand new 1995 trailer for under $700 a month. And I'm like, well, I did say to God that I wanted a home of my own. I didn't say what kind of home. So tell me more. He said, well, I need to explain to you that buying the mobile home is the easy part. The difficult part is where you're going to put it. Like, oh, yeah, right. Because I don't have land. And that means that we would need to put this thing in a trailer park somewhere. And I wasn't that excited about living in a trailer park. And at this point, I still had not told my wife anything about this deal that I had made with God, even though I was driving around in the Volvo and I was now talking to this guy about buying a house. I did not tell her anything about it, nor did I tell any of my friends. So I said, well, let me think about it and we'll get back to you, but I think I'm interested. I said, tell me if you find a good place to put the house and get back to me in a few days. So he did. He called me back in a few days. He said, I don't know, but you're a lucky man. I guess it's because there's nobody else that I'm dealing with in December because nobody is interested in buying a home. But there is a spot in one of our best trailer parks, and it's right on the back edge of the trailer park, so you wouldn't have anybody living behind you. There's just woods in behind you. So you'd have somebody to your left, you'd have somebody to your right, and then you'd have the whole trailer park in front of you, but you would have your privacy in behind your house. You could go into the woods if you want to get away from, all the people. And so we went and had a look, and it was actually a really nice place right out on the outskirts of the city. And for a trailer park, it was actually pretty nice. And so it was at this point that I finally told my wife at the time that what was going on, because at this point it was pretty hard to hide it anymore. We were now looking at homes, and we needed to pick out a house, a trailer for us to live in. So I told her the whole story about how I'd made a deal with God, and I said that if He provides all three of these things, that I would give them all back and that I would go wherever God wants me to go and do whatever God wants me to do for the rest of my life. Because at that point, I would know that He was real. Well, this kind of freaked her out in some ways, but it also kind of made her excited. So we bought the house, bought the trailer, and moved in with our brand new trailer and the colors we wanted. And of course, my wife got to pick out all the designs and that sort of stuff. And it was really, I had grown up with trailers myself. And so it wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't what I really wanted when I pictured it in my mind when I made the deal with God. But it was definitely a nice place to live in a decent trailer park. And, no complaints. So 2 parts down, 1 to go. Well, it wasn't too long after that. As promised, I had my performance review coming up at work. And my boss took me aside one day and he said, look, I have had a discussion with my boss about you, about the idea of bringing you on full time. And I said, wow, that's really great. And he said, I want to let you know that we are prepared to offer you a contract, full-time contract. And here's the terms. We are willing to offer you a salary of $26,000 per year. Now, at the time, I had been making approximately $23,000 annualized, but it was month to month. And so this was going to be a pretty significant jump, more than 10% jump in salary. But he said, and in addition to the $26,000 worth of salary, we also are offering you a $4,000 benefits package for a total of $30,000. Well, you can imagine that that was pretty crazy. From $23,000 to $30,000 in one jump was a pretty big jump. And yet, there was this problem. You see, when I had talked to the guy about the house, I had to admit that what I had said to God, and of course this is all going on in my head, didn't say this to him, but when he said that it was a mobile home, I'm like, I didn't specify what kind of home I wanted. I just said, God, I want a home of my own. And God provided me with a trailer. But this time, I was very specific. I said, I want a salary that pays $30,000. Now, this was on a Friday afternoon that I had this conversation with my manager. And I said to him, I said, look, I would like to talk to you about this on Monday when I come back. Can I talk it over with my wife and get back to you on Monday? He's like, of course. That would only be the right thing to do. I'll look forward to talking to you on Monday. I said, first of all, thank you so much. It's a wonderful offer. I'm really excited about it. But I knew in my head that there was a problem. This was not what I had asked for. I did not say, God, I want you to give me a salary plus benefits package that equals $30,000. Although this could have been construed that way. I could have made that work. And it would have been a great deal, for sure. I mean, to go from $23,000 to $26,000 plus a $4,000 benefits package would have been fabulous. So anyway, I went home, talked to my wife, and explained everything to her about this. And I said, I can't do it. And she's like, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, remember with the house, I said that I wanted a home of my own. Well, this time it was very clear, this is not about the money. This is about, is God real? I need to know, is God real? And I didn't ask for $26,000 salary plus a $4,000 benefits package. So I'm going to go back on Monday and I'm going to tell him that I can't accept this deal. And she's like, really? Like, it's so good. But she understood. So on Monday I went back. Obviously my boss was very eager to talk to me about, landing the contract and all that sort of stuff. And I took him aside and I said, Peter, first of all, I want to thank you for getting me this incredible offer. This is really, really amazing. I don't want you to misunderstand that at all. I'm very, very grateful. But I made a deal with God. He's like looking at me like, what? I said, yeah. So I told him the whole story about the Volvo and the house and everything. I said, but I made a deal with God and I said that I wanted a salary of $30,000 a year. So as much as I appreciate what you've done, I'm going to ask you to do something crazy. I'm asking you, would you please go back to your boss and ask him if instead of the $4,000 benefits package, if you can just make it $30,000 salary. And he looked at me and said, "Of course I'll ask, but I really pushed hard on this for you, and I don't think he's going to go for it. But I will ask, absolutely. I understand now everything's going on." So he went and talked to his boss, and a couple days later, he called me into his office, and he said, "You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you." I'm like, "Well, please tell me." He said, I told him the whole story, your whole story about the car and the house and $30,000 and how you said that you were really appreciative, but you wanted to give up the $4,000 benefits package so you could have a salary of $30,000 because you need to know if God is real. And Peter was a religious man himself. He used to go to church a lot. And so I think this was kind of like speaking to him as well. So he said, I told this whole thing to my boss, and he said, "Man, I really like this guy. Tell you what," he said, "I like this guy so much, I'm going to tell him, I want you to tell him, let's give him the $30,000 a year plus the $4,000 benefits package." So we go from 23 to 30 plus the $4,000 benefits package. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? That's incredible. Like, that's almost too much. He's like, no, he said he wants to offer you $30,000 salary plus $4,000 benefits package on top of that. And we want you to be working here full time. I said, well, obviously the answer is yes. I accept. Where do I sign? I definitely want to do this. So he got out the paperwork. I signed I don't know if the 1-year contract or whatever. But I was a full-time employee making $30,000 now. And a third of the 3 things had come true. As I signed the papers, I looked at my manager, Peter, and I said, "Peter, I've got some bad news for you." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, the one part about the story that I didn't tell you was that I promised God that if he made himself real to me by giving me these 3 things, I said, I promise to give them back to you, and I will go wherever you want me to go and do whatever you want me to do for the rest of my life, no questions asked." And I said, "I have a feeling that something's going to happen here in the next little while. I don't know when, I don't know how, I have no idea. I just had this feeling that as much as I love working here, that something's going to come up and I'm going to have to leave." He's like, "Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, you got the job, everything's good. Hopefully that day happens a long time from now." And I said, "Me too. I hope that this works out great. I'm very happy here, blah, blah, blah." Everything was great. So I got my 3 things. And obviously my wife and I had a big conversation about it. It's like, okay, I got the Volvo, I got the home, and now I got the salary. And not only did I get the salary, but I got it beyond what I could even ask for. I got $30,000 plus a benefits package, a beautiful benefits package. So we had dental and health and all sorts of stuff with kids. It was great. It was amazing. So it wasn't too long after that sure enough, I got a call from this little private school in a town called Mexico in Maine in the United States. And the lady who called said, "Hello, I'm so-and-so, and we are starting up a little Christian school here in our town. And we were praying and asking God to lead us to the people that we would need to have as teachers here at the school. And your name came up." Now, it wasn't completely random. This is the town where my wife was from. So they knew about me. I got married in that town, but we had only visited there a couple of times, and they didn't know me very well. But they said, when we prayed, your name came up, and we're just throwing it out there that if you would like to come to Maine to be a teacher at our little Christian school, well, we'd love to have you. She said, will you come? And I said, yes, I will come. And that leads to, of course, a whole nother story, a whole nother chapter of our lives. But that is my story about how I tested God and how I came to realize that God is real. Now, the way that he works for you, probably not the way that he worked for me. But I guess the takeaway that I have from this is don't be afraid to put God to the test. If you really want to know if God is real, test him. Ask him. Do whatever it is that you need to do to know if God were to show up in my life this way, I would know that that was him, not me. That's what I needed to know. I needed to know that this was God and not me doing it. And so I was convinced, but I would strongly encourage you, don't do what I did exactly. Do something that makes sense for you. But don't be afraid to put God to the test if you're serious about following through. Because again, I had to follow through. I took it very seriously when I got that call that day from that little Christian school. Was that really what I wanted to do? No, I wanted to continue working where I was for the rest of my life. That's what I liked doing. I was quite happy to stay. But I knew that that's what I needed to do. And it led to all sorts of wonderful adventures and stories that I will tell you later. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and look forward to the next one.